I wrote Effortless because, well, one reason I wrote Effortless is because life is so hard for everyone and in 100 ways. And the complication is we often make it even harder than it needs to be. So we add on ways that we make it tougher than would be helpful. And the impact of that is that we start to burn out and we still haven't achieved the results that are essential to us, that really matter. And so my position in this book is that we can make a different choice, that we can find an easier path, a lighter path. And if we can do that, it means the benefit is that we can achieve even possibly breakthrough results, but without burning out.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of The Future of Work with Jacob Morgan. My guest today, Greg McKeown. He's the best-selling author of Essentialism and his brand new book, which is called Effortless, Make It Easier to Do What Matters. He's also the host of a very popular podcast called the What's Essential podcast. Greg, thank you for joining me.
Jacob, it's such a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
So we were talking about the irony that you are recording your side of this from, and I won't say the exact town you're from, but from near where my parents live. And
yes.
I'm recording from where you just came back from. So small world.
Yeah, we had a moment, we played that game, and we turned out that we knew exactly each other's current place better than you would normally expect in either case, because they're kind of unusual places in both cases. This is one more evidence we're going to have a good conversation today.
Yes. Well, first question for you is, why did you actually write this book?
I wrote Effortless because, well, one reason I wrote Effortless is because life is so hard for everyone and in 100 ways. And the complication is we often make it even harder than it needs to be. So we add on ways that we make it tougher than would be helpful. And the impact of that is that we start to burn out and we still haven't achieved the results that are essential to us, that really matter. And so my position in this book is that we can make a different choice, that we can find an easier path, a lighter path. And if we can do that, it means the benefit is that we can achieve even possibly breakthrough results, but without burning out.
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, one of my favorite things from your book is you talked about this idea of work hard, play hard, and why instead we should shift to this idea of work easy, play easy. Can you talk about why the work hard, play hard is maybe not the best way for us to think about it?
Well, I think what it reveals, that phrase, work hard, play hard, is the idea that important work that can't be play. It can't be fun. It can't be easy. And a lot of people really do believe that the more important a thing is, the harder it has to be. So if you want to do something really important, then you have to sign up for relentless hard work, sacrificial experience. If you're not exhausted, you can't be doing enough. And as one of the people I interviewed for the book said, like, if you aren't working all the time, you must not have a very important job.
Yeah.
So that's the one side. And then the other side says, well, if you're playing, that's not important. But that's, you play hard because sometimes you need a break, so fine. And it's this total separation of the two. And just one of the strategies that I think is relevant to make the essential things easier is to just make the essential things as fun as possible. If you can turn, to be specific now, if you can take a chore, it's an important thing, but it feels like a chore, not just into a habit, but into a ritual, then you have something special that's going to help you to be consistent in your practice going forward. The distinctions now. A chore, we know, right? That could be something important. It might be necessary, but it feels hard. It is hard. a habit is something where we've made it routine, we've routinized it. Maybe we even know when we do it, but we do it on the basis that there'll be some benefit later. So I exercise today, that's become my habit, and I do it so that later I feel better, healthier, live longer. So there's a benefit later. A ritual is something different to a habit. They often get used interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. A ritual is something that the thing itself is enjoyable. The experience of doing it is itself rejuvenating, is itself something that you look forward to, that you enjoy. And so it doesn't just produce a great result afterwards. It does that as well, but the experience of doing it is fun. The experience of doing it is something that you want to do. And so that's the difference. And so where you can do it, maybe not everything can be done this way, but so far I've found that many things can be. Take something from a chore and turn it into a ritual. Then you have something magical to help you produce great results, but again, without burning out.
So in your book, you broke it up into three main sections, which are the effortless state, effortless action, and effortless results. So let's start with the effortless state, and maybe we can talk a little bit about what that is and how do you actually get into it?
The effortless state is something that most people have experienced, but just not very often. It's when you're in flow, it's when you're physically rested, you're mentally at ease, you're able to be at ease in focusing on what is essential to you. So that's the effortless state. What's important to note about this is that effortless state, when you get into that state, it produces things. When you're in the effortless state, you tend to take effortless action. You're able to act without strain, without forcing things, without breaking yourself or the people around you. So you get into effortless action. And the benefit of effortless action is you can start to achieve effortless results, where in an ideal circumstance, maybe it seems unrealistic at first to people, but results actually start to flow to you. And so they're not even just because you've put in effort. You've designed your life in such a way that they flow to you again and again in a residual way. So that's the model. It's like three concentric circles. One builds on the next, builds on the next in this almost self-sustaining cycle. And there's loads of reasons that doesn't happen. And there's loads of other states people are in, states of suffering, states of complaining, states of competing, states of frustration, states of anger, states of grudges. I mean, there's endless alternatives. It's a bit like, I think it's Anna Karenina, right? That all unhappy families are unhappy in their own particular way, but all happy families are happy in the same way. Something like that. I'm not quite getting the quote right. But I think that's similar when you think about effortless state. There's many other states that will produce other actions and other results, but the effortless state is quite unique. We have experienced it, but this book's about how to experience that more often so that you can have effortless action and effortless results.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I think we've all experienced it. It's just like your tasks seem to be getting done. You get through everything. It just feels easy for that day. And then other times everything feels like you're slogging through mud. And we've all been there. How do you make sure that you have more time in the effortless state?
Well, I mean, let's answer that this way. I think there's like two kinds of people in the world right now. There are people who are burned out, and then there are people who know they are burned out. And it's like you have to get into the second category, where you just recognize, man, I'm already operating in an exhausted way. One of the things that I found in the research that I thought was interesting is that the closer we get to burnout, the less likely we are to notice it. The nature of burnout, what it does to our state is that our mind becomes foggy. Well, that's true in our ability to discern whether, you read a book and you've read the same paragraph 10 times, you can't even understand what it's saying. Well, that affects the way we read, comprehend, make decisions, including being able to have self-awareness. So we get foggy even towards our own state. And so the exhausted state tends to produce more exhausted action and more exhausted results. And so people, as they approach burnout, start to try to power through it. So, of course, that's not a recipe for success. That's a recipe for, continuing this downward spiral. And lots of people, I think, hearing this will be able to relate that they've handled the pandemic, and they may even have got good results over the last 12 plus months. But they've done it through this kind of pushing more and forcing more and grinding effort, and almost unaware that there could be an alternative approach. That's the power of that first cycle. I think the first thing you do is you just recognize there are two states, there are two options. And then in terms of actually being more in the second state, there's some pretty low-hanging fruit in doing this. One thing you can do is one thing that I found helpful is an immediate interrupt to a state of suffering, a state of complaining, and so on, is this little ritual. And that is this. After I complain, I will say something I am thankful for. That simple ritual has an instant impact. Because, and again, the research is very clear about this, but it's also my own experience, and I'm sure it is for other people, which is you can't be in a state of gratitude and anger, state of gratitude and fear, state of gratitude and frustration, and so on. So the moment you interrupt the complaining state with something you're thankful for, you just trigger a step back into a more effortless way of operating. It's not a cure-all, but go ahead.
No, I like that. It's sort of like, when a train goes off the tracks and you're sort of smacking it back on. And so the complaining is the train getting off the tracks, and the thinking of something grateful is smacking yourself back on the tracks. So it's kind of the visual that popped into my head as you were going over that.
Yeah, I like that. And it's deliberate to tie this ritual to something that is easy for us. And is also, sometimes people talk about, and I believe in this, by the way, gratitude journal, every day, once a week. I do that, in fact. But that's a little different than having the trigger be something throughout the day. Yeah. When I started doing this, the first thing I noticed was that I complained way more than I realized. It was so natural. How are you doing? Oh, well, that meeting took longer than I thought. Oh, I would just say that stuff. Even though actually there were so many good things happening, but I didn't start with the good things. And so, same with my children. I could just complain. Well, why aren't you doing this? Why haven't you got your homework done? Why haven't you? And you just find yourself in a natural flow of, sometimes perpetual flow of complaining. And that's even maybe for someone, I think of myself as quite positive and optimistic and so on. But so as soon as I did this, the effect was instant. And when I fall off the track, which I often do, it's great to have this reminder to come back to it. When I realize that I'm exhausting my children, if I'm exhausting myself, okay, just catch people doing the right thing. Every time you say something, every complaint, they say something I'm thankful for. And so that's one very concrete way you can immediately start to impact your effortless, the state that you're in towards an effortless state. And as a summary principle, I'll say it this way, that if you focus on what you lack, then you lose what you have. And if you focus on what you have, you gain what you lack.
I like that.
So this to me is a very powerful, not the only one, not a cure-all, but it's one powerful strategy for immediately getting us back into the effortless state.
Yeah, and I like that simple habit, that practice, that ritual. I think it's one of those things that anybody could do, and it's pretty easy to do. So, you're pretty busy. You're an entrepreneur. You have, I believe, 4 kids. You have a successful book launch that you're very busy. You have a lot going on. One of the things that I sometimes struggle with, and I'm curious to hear how you deal with this, As an entrepreneur, sometimes I feel like I create work for myself when there isn't any work there. I don't know if that ever happens to you. You kind of feel like there's always something that you could be doing. And it also very relevant for people who have full-time jobs. You feel like there's always something more that you could be doing. You shouldn't have any downtime. You should always be working because people are relying on you. You could be building something, coming up with a new product. So how do you balance that or shut that off and just be okay with having free time?
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is actually have a done for the day list. So that when you're making your to-do list, instead of it just being the eternal list, the literally forever list, that gets often longer by the end of the day than it was at the beginning, and that's fine to have that list as a running list, but also in addition to it, to take a few minutes. I don't get to this every day, but every time I do it, it really helps change the experience of the day. So that you identify, here are the things that if I did these today, I would feel satisfied and be able to say, okay, I'm done. Those important things got done, and I can now step away satisfied with my day. If you don't do a done for the day list, you tend instead to just do more and stuff and stuff and stuff. And you can get to the end of the day, not just, I don't mean like 5 o'clock, I mean like you're lying in bed and you just feel all the burden of what you haven't done still.
Yeah.
So it's just quite a miserable way of living. So a done for the day list is one boundary you can use. Another boundary that I think is helpful is to have a set time you end the day. Mine is 5 o'clock, and I will do that. Actually, I do that quite regularly, but certainly upwards of 75% of the time. And one of the ways I hold myself accountable is I'll walk out of my office and call out to the whole family. It is 5 o'clock, like I'm a town crier. It's 5:01 or whatever the time is. And I remember once doing it at 5:23, which felt very late to be doing it. And I didn't want to have to do it loud that day. I was trying to keep myself accountable. So having a set time to be done. I think that's the first part of what you're doing, is actually creating a boundary. Because in the pandemic especially, whatever boundaries existed before are completely gone. So work took over. We've all heard the phrase, we aren't working from home, we're living at work. And that's because even before the pandemic, that was where things were tilted. Work was dominant over our life experience. Work-life balance is a bit of a misnomer because it's never life overtaking work, it's always work overtaking life. And so when the pandemic hit, that's what won. The last of the frail boundaries were gone. And so rebuilding those boundaries is a necessary first step. If you don't build boundaries, now there won't be any. But then there's still this question that you actually asked, which is what to do when you're having the break, when you're having the downtime. Because for many overachievers, that is not enjoyable. That's uncomfortable. They know they have competence to work. They don't have competence in how to relax. And so I like to start this part of the conversation by stating clearly that relaxing is a responsibility. Resting is a competency. And it turns out to be as important as the competency of work in the first place.
Isn't that weird though? Like rest is like if you were to think back, I don't know, 50, 100 years ago, you'd be done with the day and you'd be done. And now I think maybe partly because a result of technology, we're always connected. And so we always think we need to be available. And I think a lot of people forgot how to rest. They forgot how to relax. They forgot how to disconnect. They forgot how to, I remember when I was a young kid, we would play board games with my parents. We would have dinners together. I didn't have broadband internet. I didn't have social, like none of this stuff. I didn't have a cell phone.
Yeah.
And now for me personally, even it's sometimes it's challenging to relax. I have a free day and I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? I got to think, I got to give myself work, think of a new course to launch, think of my next book. Like, God forbid I should have some time to myself.
Yes. Well, that you name it exactly. And so this is a missing competency. And so it's actually more comfortable for many overachievers to just do another thing. It's easier to, if you go back in like the 80s, it's like the going into work on a Saturday morning and you're straightening the desk and pencils. And, you have no need to be there, but you just sort of, okay, well, I'm going to go there. And it's just easier. And that's how it's been set up. Now, that doesn't have to be the way it is, but we've got to own where we are in the journey. Otherwise, if we're in denial about it, denial and change are mutually exclusive. So as we accept this, now we need to actually learn how to relax, how to recuperate. And one thing I think people can do with this is it takes some self-awareness, but you start creating a list. I've done 20 items on my list now, which seems sufficient, and my wife has done 20. And so we have each other's lists. These are things that when you do them, for you, they are relaxing, they're rejuvenating. And at first, maybe you just have nothing, or you go, okay, well, actually, now that I think about this, one or two things I like. And you keep adding to the list. And you don't have to explain this or justify it to anyone. They can be unusual things. They're just things that when you do them, they chill you out. You like them. They're sort of they're the fun part of a ritual that you'd want to do regardless. Maybe it's listen to a particular podcast. Maybe it is watch a particular show. Maybe it's sitting in a hot tub. Maybe it's going on a walk. Maybe it's drinking favorite beverage first thing in the morning with a view. Someone literally told me that example one time. Reading a particular kind of book. You start making this list, and the idea is that these lists basically become a kind of Lego building blocks of enjoyment, of relaxation. And so when you have some time, when you say, okay, I'm going to have a day, instead of just constructing it with Lego blocks of work, you are constructing Lego blocks of relaxation and recuperation. And you can use these and start piecing them together and saying, well, I've got 2 hours now. What would I like to do? Oh, I like to eat at that restaurant. I like to be on a date with my spouse. I like to listen to this kind of music. And you can start to construct things together that you go, oh, this is my signature way of recuperating and relaxing. And I think that as you start to construct both parts of your life, what you're doing is you're actually operating the way that high performance people operate. I mean, forget the story. It's in Silicon Valley is one of the many locations in life that have created such heroic stories that people think that the only way to achieve this is to forget everything I just said. You just work 24/7. It's just hustle all the time. It's the only way to break through. It's such a nonsense. I mean, there's for every success story that people can point to like that. First of all, I can point to 100 failed stories, of people that are just broken now. Yep. Their health is broken, and their marriage is broken, and their family is broken, and their business is broken, and it just didn't work because it doesn't work. And even the stories that sometimes people point to as being evidence for this way of living, if you double click on those stories, and I have on many of them, in some cases I've worked with the individuals, you find that the story isn't the way that the story is told. There's more to it. And so I mean, if you start to look at it if you look at the research and the data on this, you find that just high performance requires rhythmic work, where you're working, but at a sustainable pace, and you're also taking time. I mean, think about Steve Jobs. Oh, what a workaholic. He never did anything but work, didn't he? I mean, that's the story. We know that's what he did. That's how he is it. Yeah, other than his garden, and other than his literally spending hours and hours all the time in the UK, you'd call it an allotment, but actually, digging and planting and eating food that he had made with his wife, in a huge garden lot at his house. I mean, that's just one example. Or how about the walking meetings that he was going on? What about the routine he built, where once a day he's meeting with Johnny Ive just on his own, once actually having lunch, for example. Some people think they feel guilty if they have lunch. He's having lunch, and they're just sitting there and enjoying another ritual of talking about innovation with plenty of space on their hands. I mean, you look past some of the surface story and you find a richer story underneath. A balanced approach, a more balanced approach than you'd expect.
And I mean, just hearing some of the things that you were saying, it seems like there's kind of a balance between the tactical stuff that you do, for example, lists walking out of your office at 5 o'clock and saying, it's 5 o'clock, I'm done. So there's those types of actions, but there's also the mental stuff of like getting your brain to shut off. So, I could walk out of my office at 5 o'clock and say, it's 5 o'clock, I'm done. Meanwhile, inside, I'm like, oh God, like I have 100 things to do. Like I forgot to do this. So how do you, and the tactical stuff makes sense. How do you get the brain to quiet down? Because I feel like that's something that a lot of people struggle with. I know I've certainly struggled with it. And my wife, who's an entrepreneur, she's had challenges with this as well. And I know lots of friends who have struggled with this. How do you get the brain to quiet down and be okay with not finishing a million things in a day, with shutting off at 5 o'clock and having downtime?
Okay, so I struggle with exactly what you're talking about. So I fully understand that, the challenge at hand. But let's start with like taking the opposite approach. Let's say, what would you do if you wanted to keep your brain on fire, burning up, burning out, never stopping? How would you achieve that? And one of the things you would do is you'd carry on working. You'd just not stop. So you just keep going. You'd say, so if I'm writing a book, right, if I'm writing Effortless, one approach would be, well, I'm just going to write all the time. I'm just going to be, and as soon as I'm not writing, I'll be taking notes. So I am writing in a book as well. And you just do it all the time. And it'd be easy to justify it. And that's how your brain would never switch off, ever. And then you'd come to the end of the day, oh, I can't get my brain to switch off. But why not? Because all you're doing is training it 24/7 to not switch off. So this idea, like, it's sort of hypothetical when someone says, well, there's these practical things you've said, but how do you get your brain to switch off afterwards? It's like, well, do these things first, because this actually will interrupt your brain. Now, that doesn't mean the second you stop work, your brain will relax. But as you start to construct relaxing rituals, you're going to train your brain, hey, that's not what I need right now. And in just the same way as once I started, just picked up swimming again, the swimming pool, the community pool is open again now after COVID. And so we're swimming together as a family. And at first I'm like, well, I'm not going to start at the same level I was before. Let's swim 40 lengths, let's get that going, and we'll build up gradually to the pace I was before. Well, you're training your body. This is what I need you to be able to do. I need you to be able to swim eventually back to 100 lengths, and that becomes your daily thing. Yep. In the same way, as you start these rituals, you're going to train your brain to say, this is the part of the brain I need you to access. I need you to access the relaxing experience. And the why you want to do that, the why an overachiever wants to do this, is because it's like a slingshot. If you try to stay perpetually in work mode, you're actually going to become less productive. You won't feel it at first, but you will become significantly less productive. You will hit diminishing returns and eventually negative returns. To give an example, when I was writing the book, if I wrote for 2 hours, really focused at the beginning of the day, I could maybe write 2 pages. I don't mean great pages, but 2 pages of fairly solid work, which to me is like lightning speed. It's great. If you can do 2 pages per day, you could probably just about write anything in your life. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that's because we're so intermittent as writers. So 2 pages a day is solid. If I did 3 hours, then I could produce a bit more, but not as much in the third hour as I could in the first 2 hours. So per hour, my output is now lower. That's diminishing returns. If I went to 4, 5, 6 or more hours, every hour I spent didn't just produce less than the previous hour. I was now getting less output overall. That is, for every extra hour, I was actually making the manuscript worse. And I could get to the point where if I kept going, it was like I would have been better to not write one word that day, because everything is getting deteriorated. I'm editing stuff I started at the beginning of the day. Oh, well, I should do it this way. I'm ruining stuff that actually sounds good, that was clear, a story that worked. And so you're making the whole thing worse, even though you're spending more and more time. So that's the argument for this approach is that it's a slingshot approach where you're actually relaxing, letting your mind get clear, letting your body get clear so that you're more in an effortless state so that then you can perform really well the next day.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, I'm glad to know that you've had that challenge as well. I'm sure many people out there listening and watching to this have gone through that. What does a typical day look like for you? Can you walk us through how you structure your day, and do you have any particular rituals or routines that you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, there's all sorts that I found helpful. So when I wake up, okay, let me talk about like the last week of my life. Wake up, the first thing I want to do is, well, the first thing I'll do is try and do wisdom literature. For me, that's scripture, but of course, for all sorts of people, it can be different things. But I try to get into some wisdom literature so that I'm just a little less reactive, a little less. I don't want to be eating the news. I don't want to be having like a high calorie information diet first thing. I want to be able to have some substance. I will either pray or meditate. From there, I'm heading off to swimming, as I mentioned. So take whichever of the children wants to do that. Actually, I'm missing something. We'll do a little family council normally. 15 minutes, somewhere between 15 minutes and half an hour, depending on the day. So we're synced up, go swimming. I'm normally back from that by 9, where I'm doing, the next set of interviews or the podcast and so on. I try to create space, even with the book launch, which I'm right in the middle of. I will try and take some breaks through the day. Go play tennis with my son, not for a long time. I'm not talking like a full match for an hour or two. Like today, even just right before our conversation, I just had 10 minutes and we literally played for 10 minutes. And it's not as satisfying for me as if you did maybe half an hour, an hour. I'd like a little longer, but it was so much better than just not doing it. It's a good little interaction for us. He won, which he's doing more and more now after years of not winning. So it's just clear he's going to dominate for the next 10 years of our lives. But it's great for he and I, and it's also just good to get out, physically you're outside, you're just moving and so on, and it can be part of the daily routine. I mean, those are some of the things. I at night, but the ritual at night is the journaling I talked about. I find that incredibly useful for my mental health, just to list the successes of the day and what I'm grateful for. I can't do it. I've heard of people saying, "Oh, just take 1 minute to write down." I can't do it in 1 minute. I don't really know how they can. But I'll take a few minutes, sometimes a longer time, sometimes as much as half an hour now. Not when I first started doing the journaling, but I started that like 10 years ago. And I started with 1 sentence a day. So you can do that in a minute. No less than 1 sentence, no more than 5 sentences when I first started. And that was so that I'd be consistent. And now I really like it. It's a ritual. It's really rich for me actually now. And so I pretty much haven't missed a day now in 10 years.
Wow.
So it doesn't really feel like a wow to me anymore. It's just the thing, it's just a ritual that I like, and I miss it. Some nights I won't do it and then I'll come back. I still will catch up now because I just don't want to miss
you're on a streak.
Exactly. You don't want to miss the streak, right? To 10 years, you don't want to miss it. And sometimes I will go back to 1 sentence if I need to. But I find that to be helpful. So anyway, those are some of the rituals and things that I've built in.
And around 5 o'clock, you try to be done each day.
I do. I mean, through the pandemic, so even when I was writing the book and now in launching it, I allow, with the launch, I've allowed a little more flexibility. So that's where I'm saying like 75% of the time, because I get that to be in balance over a long period of time, sometimes you're out of balance for various reasons. I think that's acceptable. But I don't ever want it to be the norm. If it becomes the norm, well, then that's your lifestyle. I mean, here I am as an entrepreneur, the whole point is freedom, is to make a great contribution if you can, but also in a way that you aren't dictated to. And many entrepreneurs actually sign up for a life that they actually don't feel any control over, and they're just consumed with a 100-hour work week. I mean, how?
It's crazy.
Why just start your own business? Why now? You're just in sort of in enslavement to some other entity of your own choosing.
Totally crazy. I know you talked about being grateful quite a bit. So one of the challenges, how do you find something to be grateful for when you feel like you have nothing to be grateful for? And I know in a previous podcast you talked about challenges that you had with one of your daughters, Eve. And even as you were going through that family crisis, you still found something to be grateful for. But I think that's hard for a lot of people, right? Things don't seem to be going your way. You're having a tough time at work. It's just nothing seems to be going your way. How do you look for that stuff to be grateful for, even in tough times?
Well, one of the things I think you can do is, should I tell the story?
Yes, please. Yeah, because probably nobody knows
whether that's helpful or not. So let me just share maybe a simple version of that story. I mean, we moved to a lovely area, quite idyllic for our children. It's out in nature, and there's more horseways than roadways. I mean, it's a really pretty place, and the children really thrived, and especially Eve, slim, brown-eyed, blonde-haired, mischievous grin. I mean, she's just like endlessly reading. She cannot stay cross to save her life. She bursts into laughter if she ever tries. She's reading endlessly. I mean, literally by this point in her life, maybe 100 different books. I mean, actually, maybe more. Now I'm sure it's 200, which is a lot more than I had at the same age.
And how old is she for people who?
Well, this was her before she turned 14. And so then she turns 14, and instead of being so voluminous and energetic and out naming the chickens and climbing trees and just that sort of raw, endless energy and personality, she just started to slow down. So she would answer us. It would take longer to do her chores. Maybe answer questions in just a few words rather than this flow of it. And we just thought, well, pretty age-appropriate behavior until she had a physical therapy appointment and she failed a reflex test, which you basically can't do. Like, that's the whole point of a reflex test.
Yeah.
And so if you do, it's a signal. And he just pulled Anna aside and said, "Look, I think you might want to go see a neurologist." And reevaluating her change in behavior through that lens instantly revealed for us, like, oh yeah, there's more going on here. And even like right when this conversation was happening, there had been a series of new behaviors that we were like, well, that does seem a bit strange. Yeah. And so you don't have to be warned twice. We started a journey, and it basically was this a massive neurological discombobulation that was happening before our eyes. I mean, every single day she's losing capability. So she goes from writing her journal religiously every day, masses of it, to not really being able to write at all. Take her like 2 minutes to write her own name, timed. I mean, that's not exaggeration. 45 seconds to write the last 3 letters of our last name. So that's exceedingly slow. And it take her hours to eat a meal. Personality change, so temperament shifted. So there's hardly any emotion, not happiness or sadness, just like neutralized. And I could go on, right? This free falling capability. And then, there's not even, the neurologists can't even point to anything of what is causing this. So all the tests are coming back in the normal range. And like, this is to see your daughter fall into a shell of herself and then to watch the light effectively go out altogether, right? That is the stuff that this human suffering is made of, or can be.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there weren't there weren't tears and pain. There was. But what became very clear was that there wasn't just one path of how to deal with this. There was two. There were two options. And one was really taking a situation that was hard and making it even harder. And we just discovered that there were things that we could not do, would not do. I'm thinking things like blaming, complaining about the doctors, not having, well, neurology. Doctors are supposed to know what to do. Why aren't they doing this? Why us? Why is this happening to us? Why to Eve? This is so unfair.
Yeah.
There's so many paths you could take that would actually take the situation and make it work. And so we started just to say, okay, we're not going to do these things. We're not going to live in denial, but we're not going to overanalyze every article anyone sends us about what could possibly be wrong with Eve. We're not going to try and do this on alone. Well, all alone. Well, we just need to tough it out. We'll do it all on our own. We don't need any help. We wouldn't torture ourselves with unanswerable questions. Instead, there were things that we could control, that we could do something about, and we would immediately do it. And really, the whole model we've been talking about grew out of this experience. That was the seeds of it. And then I went and did research to really understand why it worked, and also to better apply it ourselves. So the things that we did, simple things to improve the state and culture of the situation. We'd get around the piano and sing. We would play, we'd read books, we'd play games together, we'd laugh together, we'd go on walks together, we would catch any possible thing we could be grateful for.
Yeah.
Which is kind of coming full circle to the question you asked. We would toast each other, we'd have dinner together still. All of that kept us in a much lighter, more what I would call now an effortless path, an effortless state, so that we could better discern which things to focus on and which not to. If you're in a state of stress, you can't discern what the right thing is to do. If you're exhausted and burned out, you don't know, that little intuition you need in addition to learning which neurologist should we pursue, which things should we pursue, which things should we let go. Your discernment's way down.
Yeah.
And so by being in the right state, we were able to discern the better action and better course of events, led directly to finding the right neurologist, the right treatment, and so progress started happening. So at time of this conversation, she is the best she's been in the last 2.5 years. I would say now, for the first time, I would say she is back. She is herself fully again, and she's thriving again, and she's and of course we're very grateful about that.
Yeah, no, congratulations. I have a soon-to-be 5-year-old daughter and a soon-to-be 1-year-old son, so I can.
Well, congrats.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what it would be like to see one of my kids going through that. That must have been very, very hard. But I'm glad that she's doing better.
Well, and to answer your specific question you asked before I told that story, it's like, well, how do you find something thankful when you don't think there's anything thankful for? Start the sentence, I am thankful for. And let yourself think about, is there anything I'm thankful for? Pause on it for a moment. I have never met a person that doesn't actually have things to be thankful for. And I don't mean a few, I mean an enormous number. It's just that we get into a state where we can't even see the things that are going right for us. That there are times when fear and concern and worry and exhaustion and anger will so blind us. It's almost like we have, I don't know, a bit like cataracts growing to the point that we can see less and less light and less of what really is going on. In gratitude, you just start small, but say something you're thankful for. I have sometimes, on my worst days, I will say, I am thankful that this bad thing happened today. Sometimes I have done it that way. And I have to sit there like, well, why am I thankful for that? And then something comes and you go, well, at least you've got an opportunity to learn in this situation, at least. And you start to find that it's not about just being thankful for the good things. The magic is you're grateful in everything for everything. And it starts to shift the tonation of your life, because you start to say, life isn't happening to me, it's happening for me. And so you start to be thankful for the trial.
Yeah.
Because something is good in this, something is great in this, something here is going to give you something you didn't have before. And you start to see even the challenges of life with quite an asset mindset, let's say.
Yeah, the growth mindset, always looking for the learning opportunities, which I think is extremely valuable.
Yes, and I just push for a second. It's more than just the learning. Yes, there is a growth mindset, and yes, there is a learning benefit and dividend. But I think it's also, it's recognizing that some of the challenges of our lives really are assets. They are. I mean, this experience I went through with Eve, I couldn't have written this book without the experience. So there's no effortless book without what I'm describing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have done the research. I wouldn't have chosen this theme. I wouldn't have been able to understand it in a necessary new way, the almost universal challenge with human suffering. I mean, it's almost universal. Like, life's experiences have brought this forth. And so yes, there's lots to learn, but there's also just gains and assets and like actual dividends if you can respond with this easier, more grateful state.
I love it. Well, before I ask you where people can go to grab a copy of your book, what are you grateful for today?
Oh my goodness, today I feel so grateful today. I'm grateful that Effortless is coming out. It's a long time coming, and I feel like it has the power of relevance right now. I feel a responsibility with it. It's not like, oh, I just hope the book is successful type feeling. It's so many people are struggling. So many people feel the only path forward, even in a state of burnout, is to just power through. And that is so exhausting and painful for people. They just don't know that there's even an alternative path.
Yeah.
I feel very grateful for the experiences that I've had and the work that's gone into writing Effortless, that there's just a chance to, because you can't help everybody, but maybe there's a few people that can be helped. Maybe there's one or two people listening to this, watching this, that are like, yeah, this is what I need right now. That they are ready for this, and this book is there. I'm so grateful for that. I'm grateful for so many people who have who are just lining up to support me in doing this. I'm thinking of my immediate family, my wife and children. I'm thinking of extended family who have taken a real interest in it. I'm thankful for, there's just thousands and thousands of people that have pre-ordered the book, and what can you say about those people? They're just, the people that are doing that, they don't even know what's in it. It could be rubbish. The book could be terrible. It could be. People write rubbish books. And just because you wrote a book last time that somebody liked doesn't mean that you did a good job this time. And that they took a risk. They're just a sense of confidence. They're just saying, we believe in you. What a blessing. What a lot to be grateful for.
Yeah.
And I think that just one final point on this is something someone said to me. Benjamin Hardy said on my podcast, on the What's Essential podcast, is he gave me this language, which I love. It's not in Effortless, but I love this, is, are you in the gain or in the gap? That's the best succinct summary to me of like effortless state or not, gain or gap. If you're in the gap, you're comparing yourself to someone else who's achieved something you haven't. Which of course there's always someone to do that with. You're comparing yourself to your own ideal, what you would like to achieve one day or become. And if you spend too much time in the gap, you simply will be miserable. You might even achieve a lot of things, but you won't enjoy any of it.
Yeah.
You won't be happy through any of it. You will be miserable because you'll just be endlessly experiencing what you don't have, what you aren't yet, what you haven't become. The gain is to live in the gain, is to say, well, how far have I come? Where did I used to be? Who have I become over the last few years? What journey have I? If you can be in the gain, then you'll also could be successful, but you'll be a lot happier in the journey. And so I have that choice, as everyone else does, but I have it today is that the book comes out. I could be in the mode of, it wouldn't be hard to be in the mode, well, I want it to be a #1 on Amazon all the time. There's some books that happens to, Oh, if it's not, then you'll be miserable. You could be miserable. You could be #10 on Amazon all the time and still be miserable if you're comparing yourself against someone who's #1. And as we all know, being #10 on Amazon would be enormously successful. Yeah. You could never, there's no point you can achieve where you'll be happy if you live in the gap. And so it's like a deliberate choice too. Look at how far we've come. When I first came from the United Kingdom, I had no money. My parents, neither of them graduated. Neither of them went to college. I have a sister, quadriplegic sister, seriously disabled. My own daughter, as I've talked about, neurological conditions. I could go on. There's lots of things you could worry about, complain about, so on. But if you look at where you've come from, I mean, what so much to be grateful for. And that state produces a better way to take action, where you're taking action without strain, and that tends to produce results that flow to you. And so that's my answer to your question.
Well, I love it. I mean, your sense of positivity and optimism and gratefulness is very, very contagious. So I hope that people who watch and listen, if anything, they take away from this. I hope it is at least that mentality of finding something to be grateful for all the time. Greg, where can people go to learn more about you, your book, anything that you want to mention for people to check out?
Look, I mean, the Effortless is everywhere, right? Everywhere that people buy books, so you can get it anywhere. But the one thing I would say just right now is, actually, I think the one thing is just go subscribe to the What's Essential podcast. I think that's the thing I would say. If there's one thing, because that's where you'll get to have conversations. It's completely free, of course, as we know, and people get to continue to have this conversation over a long period of time. So I think that if I could say one thing, that's the thing I would say for people to do.
Well, very nice, Greg. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak with me and share your insights.
Jacob, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
My pleasure. And thanks everyone for tuning in. My guest again, Greg McKeown. Make sure to check out his book. It is called Effortless, Make It Easier to Do What Matters. And of course, his podcast, it's called the What's Essential Podcast. You can find it pretty much anywhere you can find a podcast. And I will see all of you next week. Thanks for watching. And if you want more content just like this, please remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you want to find out if you are a future-ready leader, if you have the skills and mindsets to lead in the new world of work, you can take my assessment at futureleadersurvey.com. That's futureleadersurvey.com.